So this is going to be hopefully a short review of what I have done recently after coming back from Flutter to native Java Android development. So the last major project I was working with this navigation tutorial project, which I want to explain. The motivation of this project was to learn the new navigation component using Java. On the internet, on a YouTube, you can have a couple of tutorial videos, all of them in Kotlin. I can definitely read Kotlin, but this is not the language I'm interested in at all. So with this project, what I have done, I just followed the instructions from the get started with navigation, and then this was the project more or less that I was implemented. So from this URL, Android.com guide navigation getting started, and to make it a twist and use it my style, I a big fan of data binding. Originally I wasn't, but when I learned how great data binding was implemented in Android together with live data and view model, I became really a big fan of these Android architectures, and that was one of the reasons I dropped not easily Flutter, because this Android architecture, in my opinion, is even better than Flutter. So anyhow, so this was the article which I started reading, understanding how it worked together. So the idea came from here. Most of the ideas. However, again, I improved it significantly to make it a lot more adapted to my style. And then here was the source code on GitHub gist, a number of files, how he used, for example, here is an example that this is the main fragment. It has a layout which is for data binding, and he was using a view model, typically also in my case, that he passes the view model to the fragment XML, and then he is using this binding expression like so to set the destination. Nav direction, get action ID. So that was the initial starting point. Okay, I also want to explain that a year ago I bought a package called Awesome Material, Google Android Material Design on Envato Market, and this is now in 1.8 version, and this version is reworked for this Android X infrastructure. So definitely this is a good repository to me to see some of the solutions which I'm going to use in my applications. Back to Android Studio, just a quick review what I have done here. This one what is interesting is that we have a navigation graph. The navigation graph is really cool. The host here is an activity layout. So normally what you should do is in a main Android main, just include this nav host fragment in the middle, and it is very nicely supported by the designer, the layout designer too, because in the containers you have a nav host fragment and you simply drag and drop this component into your main layout and everything works fine. In the navigation graph, when you click here, so the start destination is the main fragment. In my case, and then when you are done with the definition of the host, what you should do is first create an empty navigation graph, and then in your activity main you just add this nav host, and then it automatically detects that you have a navigation graph already and configures accordingly. And then with this button you always have the option new destination, means it creates a new fragments for your application. So this whole navigation concept is based on that you have one activity and a number of fragments, and this navigation is actually handles the switching between the navigation, including animation. Looks really cool and very easy to use. Actually, I love it. So then you define your fragments. The main fragment is marked as this is the starting point, and then you simply draw lines. You can define animations from enter exit. The pop enter means actually the enter exit is the forward direction navigation, and pop enter exit is the backward navigation when you press the back button during navigation. And you also have the option to define arguments. I initialize safe arguments here, and I love it too. However, the safe arguments is especially useful when you are not planning to use a view model, because I am planning to use extensively the view model architecture components together with live data, which I love a lot. Definitely for this safe arguments is not really important, but because in my opinion normally the parameter handling should be done on the view model level. But anyway, it's nicely included here. And you also have the option to define a pop, that is backward navigation behavior, that is you can define that for example when the backward is clicked, from here you go practically you skip this. So that's why this means specify amount. This fragment will be skipped. So it's very hard to decipher from this naming. Pop behavior means pop to but skip it. Yeah, that's how it is done. I don't know what is this launch options. Right? And then the configuration of this project was that normally I use this extensively, this project structure, and when I click in the app module, I just simply use this tool to define components like Android X dot navigation fragment. I press enter. Sorry. Yes, Android X, Android Arc navigation fragment, Android X navigation fragment, and this is what I have included here. So to review what modules I have added, let's check out the Gradle script files. For the project level, I have added one dependency, is the Android X Navigation Safe Arc Gradle plugin. This was required for the Safe Arc, so actually that's all you should do for Safe Arcs, at least in this project level Gradle file, and then you should add 2 more lines in the module level Android apply plugin Android X navigation.safeArc. So this generates files for you, generated Java when in my application here you go. These are the confirmation fragment arguments. This is what it generates for arguments, and it is also generates directions and arguments. These are the 2 things. Very cool, and it works really great. So for direction, this is absolutely fantastic. For arguments, as I explained, it works excellently, but if you use view model, maybe this is not that terribly important. Back to the module, yes, and then the usual data binding enabled, and here are the navigation. Yes, these are the navigation components I have included. This Google Android material might be interesting if you want to use components, user interface component from this. And this is also interesting and important. Interestingly, it doesn't have this Android X extension, but this is terribly important for data binding, because not for data binding, sorry, for view models, because this defines one of the most important object for view model handling. Say for example in the main activity, this is the class, the view model providers it comes from there. So it's very important. Okay, so that was the configuration, and then I simply started using the data binding. For example, here there is one possibility: you can use the data binding util to load your layout XML. And then here is the way to find a view model for your application. This is my view model. So I modified it significantly, as I mentioned earlier, based on the initial article from this guy I have shown. So here I use directly the nav directions, live data streams, and then it's the main activity's job actually to perform the navigation. This is important for data binding, set lifecycle owner, otherwise it doesn't work. The nav controller is the fragment in the middle of this main activity layout, and this is one way to find it. This was another more complex way, that this one is even simpler. Find nav controller, and then this view model, this activity, main activity, is observing the destination, the new destination coming from the view model, and when a new destination is arrived, then the nav controller simply navigate to that fragment. And what is also interesting, that when you, for example, choose recipient fragment, let's see how it works. So it also works with safe arguments. So the safe argument generates the choose recipient fragment directions, directions classes, and then a static constructor, action recipient fragment to specify element, and then and that's what is interesting, this parameter is the argument. This is the string parameter. So that way this nav destination object actually may contain also the arguments. Very cool. And this is exactly the specify amount fragment. This is the, yes, this is the other options where I use safe arguments. So recipient name and amount, this was the way this nav directions objects were created. So the nav direction objects could have even the arguments which are generated by these safe arguments. And then this confirmation fragment, for example, was what get the values from, but forget about this bundle. There is another bundle called get arguments, and this is important. So first I thought that saved instance state is come, but no, it comes from the get arguments method, and then this safe arguments generates this confirmation fragment arguments class, and then a static from bundle utility method, and then from this it generates the confirmation fragment arguments instance. And from here you have the option, you see, that's why I love data binding. You can define the binding set recipient and set amount. Actually these are variables, data binding variables. In actually the whole argument could have been defined 2, so it shouldn't be a problem. Let's check out this layout. This is the confirmation, fragment confirmation. When I open it, this is the confirmation, not very interesting. This is the interesting part. So here for this experiment, I just defined the recipient and the string, and this was the way I used in the central text to view that the amount was sent to recipient. So here in these binding expressions, you can use any expression, make sure that the variables are valid and defined. So practically the reason I love data binding, that is absolutely type safe. So here maybe during this editing of these text views, it doesn't give you an enormously big help of finding out for example, when I press the button, the dot, it doesn't show the parameters available for the string. But for example, yes, so it gives some help. So at least you have the option to select a variable. But in a number of cases, it also gave some tools here. Definitely, it's really up to the Android Studio developers to decide to improve this intelligent help in this editor. So this is one of the way I wanted to explain how this navigation, it's really that simple to use. Okay, so again, let's check out how it works. Going back to the fragment main. Here I defined a variable, binding variable, the VM, this is the view model object, and then here I use, similarly as suggested, the set new destination, and then this was an object, a function, this was generated by safe args, and this was the static constructor which generated a nav destination. So I simply directly use this. It's not really in my opinion, the purest way of doing, because this is a user interface element, and then a decision like where to navigate when this button is clicked is not necessarily the job of this XML file. But anyhow, so this is just a technical demonstration, and it shows that this flexibility is fully supported, and then practically with data binding you can decide and do whatever you wish. Yes, so this was one of the way. And then when I had parameters, for example, in the choose recipient, for example, in the choose recipient, when I had the button, here I defined two binding variables. One was the view model to navigate, to handle the navigation. The other was the fragment. I was also interested in to get a fragment, because when you have an argument here, when a button was pressed, set new destination, the problem was that we wanted to build a nav destination which contained the values entered by the user here in this text field, text input edit text like so. but so far I haven't figured out any way to do it without coming back to the fragment and then get the value from there. So this is really a weird, maybe this is just a lack of my knowledge, maybe it's doable with data binding. That is, we have here a component which has an ID, but we don't have the option with simple data binding to get the value from this component. Actually, I have some ideas how to do it anyhow. So this is only a problem when you need parameters. However, when you use data passing, argument passing using the view model, you don't need this tricks. So when I open the activity Java fragment, the fragment Java file, which in this case is the fragment choose recipient. So this Java class here I defined a get direction with recipient. So here I do the getting of the text string and constructing a object, and then the other which was implemented here, not here, fragment choose recipient, the other button was practically a cancel button which simply used the fragment dot get activity dot on backpressed function for backward navigation. So what I have in my mind at the moment, maybe I could simply use data binding for this text editful bidirectional data binding live data components, and therefore these variables could be included here, and then we may use this variable directly. Anyhow, so this is what I am going to experiment in the next section. So practically that was the application. Let's give it a quick demo how it works. Couple of minutes. So while Gradle is building the application and loading it into the emulator. No, it was really fast. Installing APKs. Actually, what I loved very much with this Android Studio and this native application development, that when you work with Flutter is excellent with this hot reloading, is really good. But when you build an application from scratch, and loading it's really a lot of work. So this is really snappy and quick to start. So for example, here I have the send money, and then I can define the name, auto, and next amount, and send. But here you go, was sent to auto. Of course it works excellently. We can press cancel. Yes, the reason it quit because I configured in the navigation graph. Let me just open the nav graph again, that this direction, not this, okay, let me just make it bigger. In this direction I simply skip the main fragment, so this application, when you are coming from this direction, never goes back to this main fragment, but it quits. From this direction I haven't defined any, so from this direction it works fine. Let me just go back to this emulator, and then this was this. Yes, for example, view transaction, when I press back, it comes back. So when I come here and when I press back, it quits. The reason it was programmed like so, just to simulate that when your first page is a login page, after the login page, normally you don't want the user just to simply navigate back. The correct navigation back is to press the sign out button. And it is also important that these options, navigation options as defined here, can be done, created on the fly too. This is called navigation or nav options, and then definitely it's also supported. Okay, just to complete my video, so I've explained all of these projects. Okay, I have initialized a new project, this Gradle, where I started my project. In the project structure, these are the packages are needed, and then this is section for safe args configuration, and then create the nav graph empty, and then open activity and the layout designer delete text view, and then select the nav host fragment from the container. So this is the cleanest and the safest way. And also make sure to define data binding, because data binding is so cool. And the project was in the experimenting with Android, and this project is available here. Okay, and then a couple of additional comments to complete. I still have a number of number of jobs to do, and watch videos, for example, using the navigation, how to use the navigation drawer. Actually, now that I clearly understand how this navigation works, these additional nifty things should be added. This menus, how to include and integrate. And this is a Kotlin example, but as it doesn't matter for me. I just found a very nice guy who has a number of very nice looking screens, and their applications are available on the GitHub, so I'm going to check out these two. This was the guy who is using Java 2, and this navigation component video is short and really great, because he's using also Java, and he also showed a couple of interesting things. For example, how to create dynamic nav options. And then this is a very knowledgeable guy, this Melar Dev. He's a Spanish guy, and then I want to see how he is doing using JSON parsing and reading. This was just a nice demonstration how to use the text watcher. Safe args, again from yours truly. This is an Indian guy, and this was a very nice demonstration how to use safe args. Stevza son, possibly he's or Croatian or Serbian, I wasn't able to decide, has a very good looking. He's also has a Udemy training course on using Adobe design tool, and then he is really brilliant in designing nice good looking buttons and user interfaces. And he also is really great in Android programming itself. And these are their two videos about how to read and write files on Android. The reason I'm interested in is that in my new project I don't want to use a database and a local database to save temporary projects, temporary workflows. For example, the goods receipt purchase order. Instead, I simply write the JSON file directly onto the device. He also explained a very nice 10 useful shortcuts for Android Studio. One of them was this Command P for displaying the arguments. Again, a nice animation, and again some examples how nice. The problem with these guys, his work are not available on GitHub, so he's not publishing their work publicly available, unfortunately. And also an explanation on runtime permissions, very cool. Again, animations, again, fun. So I spent quite some minutes watching the works of this Croatian or Serbian guy. Shared preferences was one of the options I was thinking to save these JSON files, but then I decided it's much better to use regular files, because then when there is any problem with the device, these temporarily saved JSON files are available and can be easily copied and moved from the device. And here this sample also explains how these files are available. I was thinking of saving the password on the device, but then I decided for a commercial application maybe this is not the correct way. However, I've just learned that in Android there is a official way to use a key store or something like that, so therefore it could also be completely possible and fine to save the password for automated relogin when the application is started. Again, some articles about the JSON, and then up bar navigation component for the navigation, and also the coding with Mitch, forget him. and then resocoder. These are Kotlin examples, and then these two guys are very ambitious, but honestly, in my opinion, they are mediocre programmers. Okay, and then before coming, I don't remember, I watched this Android navigation anyhow. So before coming back to native Android Java development, I spent a hell lot of time watching every possible Flutter videos. In my opinion, absolutely the best was this series from a guy called Zaiste. I had the impression he might be from Poland, or where I wasn't able to figure, maybe for Switzerland, but he is really brilliant. The only he was a big aficionado of Flutter, not only Flutter programming, but using the streams and the block pattern, and absolutely what he was doing is excellent. And if I were a Flutter Dart programmer, if I remain with Flutter Dart, definitely I'd go with the way he suggested. But honestly, this reactive programming, I spent quite some time with React TypeScript and React JavaScript. I wrote a number of experimental applications, and now with Flutter, I'm absolutely not sure if this reactive programming is not a dead end, because at least for business application, for example, like mobile warehousing or manufacturing. So this reactive programming is, wow. It's so definitely I decided no way, don't want to go this reactive programming, because Android, the Android pattern, the way the user interface with this live data view model is classic, easy to understand, and then with this navigation, it's data binding, it's very easy to use, and fast, and really fast. Okay, I don't go into the details of some of them because, and then, okay, so that was a short summary of what I have done recently. And let me see if there is anything here. Okay, I just went on writing my logbook, experimenting with Jetpack Android architecture with Java, and then I wrote a section about navigation, safe hours configuration, just to me myself to remember what I have done, how it should be done, what are the pitfalls, what are the suggestions. So that's the reason when I'm watching a video, at the same time I also start writing my comments. And here is a list of the to-dos: watching videos for navigation action bars, bottom navigation, I need a login screen, navigation drawers, additional action menu settings, logout profile, logout, and a number of others, history. Then JSON placeholder demo functionality with volley. Volley, I decided to go volley and JSON. Multi-action navigation. Yes, that's another interesting topic. If I write a multi-module application, that every navigation component is actually an activity, and then a number of fragments. And then when you can have multiple activities with each its own or their own fragment navigation. Yes, and then service layer with Android Volley. Yes, a lot of things to learn and to do. So actually I might be how to say sorry that I spent so much weeks on experimenting with Flutter, but actually it was really an important, because now I'm pretty sure what are the limitations, what are the problems of Flutter, and then actually it's could be brilliantly used for anything, but it was the reactive application style, UI style, which I didn't like. The language Dart to me was absolutely brilliant and fantastic. Okay, that was all.